There were 3 vehicles that were available for free on World of Tanks console as part of the Christmas event, but this tank right here, the CS52 list, was part of this. But not only that, this was also a season pass reward when Wargaming first started with their kind of initial seasons that they released on the game after update 6.0. And today's video is of course showcasing this tank, as well as showcasing whether or not it's really as good as some of the other vehicles that you could have picked up as one of the operations whereby you had to get a numerous amount of points and then you could pick the vehicle to be able to earn. But the CS52 list is, in my opinion, probably the more consistent of the 3 vehicles, them being that you could basically get the CS52 or the T42, or you could also get the K91-2. Now, the CS52 in this sort of position is actually a very nice position for this tank, and in general, if you do win this top area where you do not have the enemy tanks also pushing over the hill, then you can come away with a decent chunk of damage, as well as cover the central area where you see the heavy tanks on the enemy team, including the Tiger II. But we quickly finish off the HMH M51, so that's the Super Sherman. I believe that was also free, but this game in particular is a tier 10, as you can see, the Rhinoceronte on the enemy team, and also the Tyran pushing in the centre. Now, the CS52 list against those sorts of tanks basically doesn't have armour, but yeah, in a tier 10 game this can still be competitive, and that's ultimately what we're trying to showcase today, is that yes, you can have these tier 8 mediums that are okay in the same tier, but this one in general is probably more well versed to playing at tier 10 than the other 2, because of the fact that you are fairly kind of mobile, you can get around and you can do all kinds of things that maybe some of the others couldn't. Granted, this tank doesn't have the gun depression and ridgeline ability that some of the others have, but either way, you know, at the beginning of the game, picking up 1700 damage is not bad at all, and you can really push forward with the mobility of this tank. If you like any of the Soviet medium tanks, then you'll probably really enjoy playing the CS52, because, you know, you can be just an annoyance and a nuisance. You can bounce a few rounds every now and again, as well as kind of just be a force to be reckoned with at tier 8 as well. And in fact, if you do come into tier 8 matchups, this is a pretty dominant tier 8, and that's really where I think the CS over some of the other vehicles can be super annoying for opponents to come up against. But I'm really interested to see whether or not you did actually pick up this vehicle as part of that operation during the Christmas event or holiday ops, or whether you picked up the T42 or the K91-2. And if you've watched any of the reviews recently on the channel, you'll have seen both of those tanks. This is the 3rd and final installment of the premium tanks that were available for free. So hopefully this one showcases that, you know, either pick that you chose is actually not a bad option. You know, there are loads of different options that were available, and if you picked one and you actually think you would have rather the other, then just know that there wasn't that much of a difference between them all, and actually you'd be happy with any of them. And of course, they can be released in keycards that you can get for free during the season passes anyway, so if you get them, maybe you don't actually play the tank, but if you ever then receive them in any keycards, you can get them for essentially a potential chance at getting gold for them. But in this replay you're seeing here, pushing the advantage against the Tyran, using the stealth and kind of mobility to avoid taking any Tyran hits, because we all know about how broken the 950 alpha that the Tyran has can be. And luckily on our team we have the FE215B183, which is probably one of the only other tank destroyers that can really successfully take out a Tyran from near enough full health. So it's really nice to see a Tyran being taken out of the game, since I'm sure you've been plagued with them if you've played up against them. But you can see here we've loaded the HE rounds for the Batchat 155-58, so we'll just wait until he comes out into the open, we can plow one in and of course pen for more damage. Or maybe we can't, and we actually end up dealing a slightly less damage than what you would have done with the standard round. So of course the HE pen on this is not particularly amazing, but you know, that was probably more down to the fact that we hit the tracks of the Batchat rather than actually hit the tank itself. But there are 2 tanks left. There's a tank destroyer and of course the Batchat, so we're just hunting them down, trying to find out where they are. The Stark is of course up in the area above. You can see we try and go for the shell into him. Unfortunately he doesn't manage to hit. And it's looking like we're about 3,100 damage so far. We of course fire on the move at the back chat and luckily actually hit him somehow, but you know, World of Tanks things, and pick up a nice little but decent chunk of damage, like 3,800 combined. Nothing spectacular, but you know, that's what you can do in a tier 10 game. Let's shift over to a tank game where we're slightly better matched up. Now then, in this game, we are playing in tier 9 vehicles, I think. In fact, no, I lie, we are also in a tier 10 game. So scratch whatever I just said, this replay is up against tier 10s. So we're still going to have to compete with tier 10s, and you can still do that. And in this sort of game, you can play quite aggressively, especially on canals, since canals is a fairly good map for medium tanks, especially if you've got a little bit of armor. If you're used to side scraping with some of the mediums that you have in the game, then you'll really enjoy playing something like this. And it very much plays like a T-44 or a Motherland or something in that region, but just slightly better in my opinion than those two, just because it feels a little bit more consistent at dealing damage than the previous. Now we've got ourselves into this position. It's a nice early game at spotting and damage position, and you can always move from here to kind of relocate and get into a better spot if you need to. Often you don't actually need to, since if you play it right you can win from this position or win this flank from this position, so you don't have to worry too much. Now unfortunately we do get hit by the Leopard 1, which is kind of annoying, since I was hoping that I'd be able to spot him when he was crossing, so I'm surprised that he managed to get that far. The back chat on the enemy team, we hit him with a nice shot there. Kind of lucky that we kind of pre-aimed it enough to the point where it was going to reliably hit. The Leopard 1 still up in his little spot on the ridge in C8 or C8, C9, and so we hit him, or at least attempting to hit him or aim over there to be able to get some damage. Now you're seeing me just trying to aim in the general direction, hopefully when he gets spotted again, if he does, that we can hit him and get a bit of that damage that he dealt to us back onto our tank. And of course when you are playing in a medium, you definitely don't want to be out traded by a lot of tanks, since you have lower hit points than maybe some of the heavy tanks in the game. So just being sure that you are going to be able to deal more damage to them than when they deal it to you. Of course, no brain blocks or brain box plays there, so you're kind of in this scenario where, you know, you just need to be consistent and find tanks that you can hit. Now the Emil 1 on the enemy team is sat in the position over here, and he's coming in, but he can certainly be a little bit of a nuisance. The Leopard 1 poking up, and we hit him with a nice little flick shot, and that's what the CS can do. It's very good at hitting on the move. You can see here trying to get another one in, kind of annoyed that I didn't manage to hit that. But nothing too spectacular here going on. But the game is still quite fresh. There's lots of damage to be had, and with a lovely shot into the Emil 1 there, hoping that we can actually retrack him, and maybe some of the opponents can get a or some of our friendlies can get a damaging hit on him to pick up some assistance. Didn't end up kind of coming about, but we can now pre-aim where the Vindicator is going to be potentially when he crosses. Of course he's a pretty slow tank, and you see here just right of this house in front, often people will kind of try to relocate back to the hill on F9 and cross at that position, but hopefully we can punish at least one shell into whoever decides to do that, and maybe even two if we can track him or do whatever. Now you see the Vindicator, just as we spoke about there, does indeed try to cross back, and we deal a nice little shot of damage. Now the CS52 in pretty consistent terms has 320 alpha, which allows it to reload pretty quickly and therefore get some tracking assist, which is what I primarily focus on if I'm trying to get damage in my tier 8 mediums. Is tracking damage can really save your games from being like very mediocre, or like, you know, you pick up a lower amount of damage, instead you can then buff it up kind of, or have your game be slightly better by getting that tracking assist or just spotting as well. So at this point, the team appears like we're going to win. There is, of course, a 4-tank advantage. We have no idea what the hit point advantage is, if there even is one. But yeah, we're just waiting now for the right opportunity. And a lot of people in tier 10 games, when they're 2 tiers lower, will like try and play it like you are the same tier as the top tier tanks. Of course, that's not going to work, is it? Because, you know, you're 2 tiers lower, you are literally worse in every way than most tier 10s in the game, or the tanks that are top tier, whatever tier you're deciding deciding to play. So playing a bit more passively, or playing in a way that you can kind of push towards tanks and come out with some wins is what you want to be doing. Now, I know that this IS-7 is going to be a nuisance for the team, so we're just trying to come towards him. Maybe we can bounce a shell and then we can deal the damage back to him. Now we deal one shot, which is nice, but we are going to need some team support to be able to actually get a damaging hit. I make the mistake of not actually fully aiming. I should have stopped when I was up against him to reduce the angle and therefore the chances of bouncing, but it doesn't matter because my team saved me. But if that was the ideal perfect scenario, I wouldn't have actually just auto-aimed, and you definitely shouldn't auto-aim. I was probably just being a bit too lazy within this game, but either way, 2,200 damage done in this tier 10 game, and so it's time now to push, because ultimately you need to start getting some damage since the game is okay, but you certainly won't be going up on your marks of excellence for just 2,000 damage. So it's all about kind of pushing forward now and using the advantages that we have. Now I go for the shot on the Pershing, which I almost hit, or at least do hit, but we don't actually manage to take him out in that shot. We then bounce off the Pershing, which is really annoying since I was hoping that we definitely wouldn't bounce off of him, and then we're just going now for the kind of turret ring, but we don't manage to hit it either way. Now this sort of scenario, you know, you could potentially get taken out by every tank in the game, so we want to make sure that we're not kind of exposing ourselves too much. The Emil 1 and the Leopard have kind of got us in a little bit of a tight spot in terms of, like, you know, either one of them could get a shot on us, but it would be quite slim either way. So instead of doing that, we're now pushing towards the Turan. Of course, that's a very risky business in terms of trying to push towards a Turan, but hopefully we can spot him and then maybe get a shot of damage for free into him as he pushes up. Now the Vindicator is over here, and in doing our kind of pushing maneuver, we now try and spot for our team. Maybe we can get some additional assistance, because that's what may save my game from being awful. We then try and go for a shell on the Turan. Of course, it doesn't actually manage to hit, but you know, it's not the worst thing in the world, and at least we get some keep the Turan lit. He then decides, you know what, it might be time for him to look over this way. I'm kind of thinking if we can get the Vindicator out of the way, then that's good. The Turan then turns towards us, probably quite rightly so he can finish us off. And instead I'm like, you know what, no, I don't fancy actually getting hit by him, so we try and run away, or at least get into a better position. The Turan is then forced to either aim towards us and hope that we come around that corner to deal more damage to us, or he turns towards the opponents. He knows he can definitely get damage, and unfortunately for us, he's kind of in that period where he's aiming at us and then aiming back, and then unfortunately for him, he does get set on fire by the 263. But we're not going to complain a whole lot, because we picked up 3,500 damage in this tier 10 game, and it kind of showcases more about how this medium tank at tier 8 can deal damage in tier 10s, and you could see picked up a decent amount of silver as well. Hopefully that showcased the CS52 list, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below. And of course, I know that these aren't the highest pinnacle games that you could possibly have, but it showcases in the worst case scenario at the bottom of the tier list that you can still perform, and hopefully that came across within this video. If you have any questions, once again, leave them in the comments, and of course like and subscribe if you did enjoy it, as it helps to spread the video to more people. And hopefully I'll see you back in the next video coming soon. Goodbye.